Hello, Hey Boomer listeners. I am your host, Wendy Green. And Hey Boomer is a intelligent, entertaining conversation show that brings you discussions with authors and scientists and thought leaders and entertainers. And our focus is on staying engaged in life, making a difference, and enhancing our sense of purpose. So if that's who you are, then we are happy to have you here and you are in the right place. So last week, I started a little new segment called Never Too Old, and I loved it. So I am going to continue that. And our first Never Too Old story is about Laura Ingalls Wilder. Now, y'all know Laura. She was the author of the Little House series. And her first book was published when she was 65 years old. It was called Little House in the Big Woods. And the last book in her series was published when she was 76 years old. Way to go, Miss Wilder. And at the age of 67, Anna Mary Robertson suffered a serious depression at the loss of her husband. And in an effort to work her way through that, she took up painting. When she was 78, an art collector saw her work hanging in a local store and bought every piece there. And we know her today as Grandma Moses. So we are never too old. And today we are talking to another author. Her name is Juliette Fay. And I love talking to authors because you learn about their thought process, how they come to these stories, what motivates them. And so I have to tell you, when I met Juliette for the first time, I was completely captivated by her. She is warm and engaging. She tells good stories just in conversation, and certainly she writes good stories. We're going to talk about her latest book. And Juliette likes to write about topics that intrigue her, that interest her. And for instance, she has written books about the sudden death of a spouse and learning how to cope as suddenly a single mother. How female friendships can get stuck in that middle school cycle. And how we all have that middle school insecurity that kind of stays with us no matter how old we get. She's written about the threat of living with an incurable disease, and her latest book, which we are going to talk about, called Catch Us When We Fall, is about alcoholism, recovery, and the struggles that the individual faces and that the family faces. So it's going to be a very interesting discussion, and I'm going to introduce her to you in just a moment. Before I bring Juliette on, I have a favor to ask of you. The best way to grow a Facebook following and an email list is through referrals. And the best referrals come from people who are already enjoying the show. So here's my request. Right now, while you're sitting there, get your pen, get a little piece of paper, write a note to yourself to send an email to your friends or your family and say, love Hey Boomer, subscribe, and you'll get 2 emails in the week. You'll get one with a link to their upcoming shows, and you'll get a second link email to the blog post. And you are going to be thanked by your friends and thanked by me. And so please don't forget to do that. Heyboomer.biz is the website where they can subscribe. Thank you for that. I'm going to bring Juliette on because I can't wait to introduce her to you. And I'm going to do a brief introduction while I bring her on. Hi, Juliette.
Hello, how are you?
I am terrific. How are you?
Good. I'm really delighted to be on your show, Wendy, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, I can't wait. So let me tell them about you first. So Juliette discovered her love of reading as a young girl, haunting the local library for the Boxcar Children series and Julie of the Woods. She graduated from Boston College with a double major in human development and theology, which Juliette says prepared her for thinking deeply about the state of humanity, but for not much else. So she joined the Jesuit Volunteer Corps and worked at an emergency shelter in Seattle. She started a daycare for homeless families and volunteered at a children's ward in a Guatemalan hospital. Then she returned to Boston and got a graduate degree in public policy from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. And she worked at the State Child Abuse Prevention Agency and ran a parenting education program. Along the way, she married Tom Fay. They had 4 children. And then Juliette decided to try her hand at writing after reading a really bad book and wondering if she could do better. She had this constant stream of stories in her head. And so while the kids were napping or arguing or after they were in bed at night, she started to write down her stories. She published her first novel in 2009 called Shelter Me, and it was designated one of the 10 best works of fiction in 2009 by the Massachusetts Center for the Book, which is an affiliate of the Library of Congress. In 2016, she wrote The Tumbling Turner Sisters, which was a USA Today bestseller. And she has written 4 books beyond those 2, including the one we're going to talk about today, Catch Us When We Fall. So let's start, Juliette. You loved reading. You studied human development, theology, and public policy. Nothing about writing or literature in those degrees.
No, I was not. People always say, were you an English major? Did you get an MFA in creative writing? No, I never did. Yeah.
So what made you think that you could be a writer?
I didn't actually. I really had no plans to be a published author. It was when my kids were little and I was home. I had worked part-time through, part of the parenting years. And then I was home full-time with 4 kids. And I was really sort of casting about for something that was mine, that was not just about sort of taking care of these children in this house and that kind of thing, which I loved doing, but I needed something else. And so I tried some stuff and nothing really sort of grabbed me until I read a really bad book that a neighbor pawned off on me. And I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. I couldn't stop reading it because it was so bad. I was fascinated. Right. But, sort of my brain likes to spin stories. And so what I did with that terrible story is say, well, who would I put in that scenario? And I started to write. And I had, writing has been something that I've loved to do my whole life. In all the jobs I had, I was always the one to say, like, I'll write the manual or I'll write the brochure or that kind of thing. I had kind of fits and starts with writing, but, and then even writing that book, it was not about getting published. It was just like, can I take one of these stories and, one of the millions that run through my head and sort of put it together as a novel with a recognizable beginning, middle, and end. And maybe if it's not terrible, I'll let my friends see it. But sort of in the process of that, the more I did it, the more I loved it. And I did let a few friends read it, that first book. And they said, this is publishable. You should look into that. And that's what sort of set me on the, in my 40s, set me on the path of seeing, like, can I get published? I'll give it a try. Why not? I had many rejections. I had many ups and downs with it, but then I had some luck. And I was able to get an agent, and she was able to sell the book to a major publisher, and we were off like a day at the races.
And so when that happened, all those ups and downs, and you find this, were you already thinking about the next book?
Yeah, because I've always got a story in my head. So actually, that book never got published. It was I always think of it as my practice novel, which is very common. A lot of writers have what we call the book in the drawer, which is, it wasn't good enough. It wasn't whatever. I mean, I did get an agent for it. And that agent tried to sell it. I didn't try very hard. But now I look back and I think I'm glad that book didn't get published, because I needed to practice. I needed a practice novel. But while I was waiting to sort of see if that one would get sold, I was writing another one. And I knew it was better. So when I finished that, I thought, let me, and that was Shelter Me. I wrote for several years before anybody was interested in me, but I loved doing it. I mean, I really think that's the special sauce, is doing something you love to do, whether or not, you're going to become a bestseller. It's just, and that's what I tell people who are aspiring writers, like, do it if you love it.
And that's what I do about the show.
Yeah.
I love it. And will it one day be picked up by a major radio show or something? I don't know, but I love doing it. So
that's
awesome.
Great. That's awesome.
So in your studies, your initial studies, like theology, human development, like you said, big thinking, big sense of meanings and purpose and whatever, how do you find that with your writing?
So, when I look back on my bachelor's degrees in human development and theology, honestly, I look back and I think, if my kids ever wanted to, I'd be like, how about some skills? The skills are good, but it is really a way to think about the human condition, and human development is all about sort of humans and how we think about things and our relationships and our aspirations and all of that kind of thing. And theology is really the way we think about spirituality and God, and how we think about redemption and hope. And so it really did sort of prepare me well to think about some of the issues that I've just explored in my writing. And I think that so in many ways, writing a story where you create characters and you give them problems, and then you try to figure out how they're going to solve those problems, if they're going to solve those problems. Mm-hmm. It's very, and my stories really do have a lot of all those things, hope and redemption and struggles and, and that kind of thing. So, and I also feel like, the stories, one of the things that was so surprising to me when I first got published, and continues to be such a source of joy for me, is when people reach out to me and say, I feel like somebody understands me. Mm-hmm. This book helped me. It helped me think about a problem. It helped me understand a friend better who's dealing with a similar problem. It helped me feel less alone, even though it's a fictional character. Mm-hmm. People have written to me and said, I feel like I have a friend. And, which is kind of funny, but also lovely. So for me, writing books is still about that human connection and that sense of feeling like I could help somebody with this. That's the best thing.
It is the best thing. And that's one of the things we talk about is, finding that sense of purpose. And it sounds like, being able to connect with people, feeling like you can help them in some way through your stories.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I said in the introduction, you started writing when the kids were young and writing in short bursts.
Yeah.
Do you still write in short bursts?
I don't, because I don't have to. I mean, sometimes I do. One of the things that was great about learning to, sort of focus, writing takes an enormous amount of focus. Like, you are putting yourself into a different time and place with different people who are not actually in the room with you. And so you have to imagine them, and you have to, having the kids around and somebody burst into the room saying, where are my cleats? It's like, pop, the bubble pops. So I really learned to, first of all, people say, like, well, what are your rituals for getting,
right.
That kind of thing. None. I have none. Because I was like, oh, it's quiet. Somebody's happily doing this project and somebody's sleeping, and then let me just see if I can get a few words in. So, that ability to sort of get in the zone quickly really served me. And it's something I still do now. I just sit down and work whenever. I'm not waiting for the muse. But now I do get longer chunks of time. When the kids were little, every once in a while I would go away. My husband would just take over, and I would go away for a couple of days and check into a hotel and, like, bring food with me. I didn't leave the room.
Wow.
And I would just write for like 2 or 3 days straight and just, just like in torrents. And then I come home and I'd be like, oh, I'm so much happier, Hi, everybody. Mom's back.
Mom's back. I downloaded all that stuff in my brain.
Right. All that stuff I've been like, I got to get this out. So I don't feel the need to do that as much anymore, although a writing retreat is really always a lovely thing, especially if I can do it, with another writer friend or that kind of thing. But I don't have to anymore.
But when you say you don't wait for the muse, I mean, do you just sit down and write and the muse comes, or you just write and then you're like, oh, that's awful, and start over?
So here's what I'm going to tell you, and I believe this to be true. There is no muse. There's no muse.
Okay.
There's you putting your butt in your chair and getting to work. And sometimes you're going to stare at the page, and sometimes something's going to come to you, and sometimes you just have to sit there for a while. But if you are a working writer, you can't, be burning incense, and you have to like get your job done. So I think it's, one of the things I say to aspiring writers, like, just open the file, look at what you did yesterday, just sit there and sort of let some of the stuff sort of flow into you. And if you sit there in front of the file long enough, you'll write and tell yourself you're just going to write a paragraph. Write a paragraph. Once you get rolling, you get going,
Yeah.
So it's a job like any other job for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I want to talk about Catch Us When We Fall. Okay.
Great.
Tell me where you came up with the title.
So I feel like I need to talk a little bit about what the book's about, so that sort of makes sense. So the story of Catch Us When We Fall, the main character is Cass Macklin. She's 29 years old, and she is an alcoholic. She had a rough childhood, is really very much alone in the world. When she was 18, she met Ben McGreevy, and they fell in love, and they had a lot of fun together, but some of that fun was not really healthy. And over the course of time, it really devolved into alcoholism. And in fact, on page 1 of the story, she is at Ben's funeral because he has died of alcohol poisoning. She very quickly finds out that she's pregnant. And that is the moment for her. That is the big U-turn moment. How am I going to handle this? She wants to have a healthy pregnancy. She wants to be a good mom. She knows she's got to get sober to do it. And she has no resources. She's broke. She's got a terrible job that she's trying to hang on to. She doesn't know any sober people. The only person she knows who she thinks could possibly help her is Ben's brother, Scott. And Scott is a third baseman for the Boston Red Sox. Yes, I am a Red Sox fan. And he is not terribly interested in helping her. He's dealt with, their alcohol-fueled messes for the last 10 years, and he doesn't really believe she can get sober. And he's not psyched about that at all. She's not too crazy about him either. I mean, he was always sort of a big wet blanket, and, he doesn't trust her, and he doesn't, so neither of them are crazy about each other, but they have a common goal, which is to get this baby into the world safely. Mm-hmm. So Scott says, okay, I'll help you, and you can live in my house. But the minute you take a drink, you are out on the lawn. And that's the premise of the story. So I cast about 4 titles for this. I learned very quickly with my first book, don't get too attached to a title, because your agent or your editor or the sales team or somebody is going to say, I don't know. I don't think that's good. But so I've had multiple titles for this book. The one I really liked was Dry Land, because I there's a number of sort of metaphors in the book about her sort of being in the middle of this ocean of booze and trying to find dry land. So my editor liked it, my agent liked it, and I thought, wow, it's going to work. And then the sales team said it's too dry. And I have to kind of agree. When they said it, I was like, yeah, they're kind of right. So they wanted a title that had a little more going on. And I went back to the drawing board. I listened to every song. I read every poem I could find about drinking and baseball and babies. And I drove myself crazy. And I finally came up with Catch Me If I Fall. And then I threw it out to, no pun intended, to some writing pals of mine and said, what do you think about this? And, the feedback that came back was great. They said, first of all, it's catch us, because we all fall. We all need that help. And it's not if, it's when. And I thought, wow, those are some really great suggestions. So that's how we ended up with Catch Us When We Fall. Catch has a little bit of a baseball thing going on, fall, like fall off the wagon. So I felt like it was, I grew to really like it.
Yeah. And the us, I mean, there really is a second character in there that is also struggling with alcoholism. And
well, multiple ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that, alluded to her as well.
Mm-hmm.
Since you were just talking about the Red Sox, Steve says, have you gotten any feedback from the Red Sox since you published this?
I'd love to. I have not. I really tried hard. The research was very interesting for this on a bunch of different levels, but researching the Red Sox was really fun, really interesting. I was never able to get a player or former player to talk to me, which I kind of get, like who is this lady? What is she going to say? What is she going to write? So I spent a lot of time with my Red Sox obsessed husband, who has been a fan since day one, since he was a little kid. And I spent a lot of time at Fenway with him, and he gave me lots of great intel. I was able to find some folks to talk to who did give me some inside information. One of whom was a flight attendant on the away game flight.
Oh, okay.
And she was great, but she said, "Don't put me in the acknowledgments. I don't want my name. I'll lose my job." So, it would be very fun if the Red Sox said, "Hey,
we're going to have to send a book to them, or a bunch of books." Yeah.
Right.
So there are a lot of flawed characters in this book. And at times I found myself like really rooting for them. You can do this. You got this. And at other times I was like, oh man, like how did you screw up like that? And so I'm just wondering, like, as you're coming up with the storyline, like how challenging was that for you to create these different scenarios for them where I loved them and then I was like,
Well, first of all, thank you, because I love creating flawed characters. And sometimes in the beginning, my characters are so flawed that I have to go back and sort of lob in a few little like nice things, so the reader won't be like, ugh, But especially with this story, I felt like the challenge was to not just, every character has to have struggles. There has to be conflict, or there's no story. So you have to give them obstacles to overcome. What I wanted to really make sure that I did with this story was show what it was like to feel like you're inside the skin of somebody struggling with this disease. And I didn't, so I didn't want to just like, it had to be something that felt authentic to what they were dealing with. And it had to be something that was going to feel realistic. So that was sort of the challenge for me. I did a lot of research on alcoholism. I have a lot of alcoholics in my life, mostly in recovery, which is great. I talk to them. And my dad is a recovering alcoholic. So I was, I knew a lot about that and what it's like for family members to deal with folks struggling with these diseases. I went to AA meetings, and it was very interesting to hear what people said in them. So Alcoholics Anonymous has two kinds of meetings, open and closed. Closed meetings, only alcoholics, and because of course it needs to be confidential and all of that. Open meetings, anybody can go. And so I would go to these open meetings, and I thought, wow, I expected them to be kind of grim and remorseful and just bad stories. And of course there was some of that, but there was also a lot of joy and a lot of gratitude for that community of people where an alcoholic can go and feel like they can be themselves and they can be honest, which honesty is so important. So I was able to sort of come up with, through my research, struggles and conflicts that would feel authentic for this story.
So one of the things that stood out for me, Juliette, in this story was that the two women that were primarily dealing with alcoholism seemed to have a purpose, that when things got really bad, I need to be healthy for this baby, or I need to be sober for my family. Do you think that's what a recovering alcoholic needs, is some kind of purpose to get sober?
Well, we all need a purpose to be our best selves. We all need sometimes something that says to us, okay, you're going down the wrong track here, but you have this reason to make a U-turn and go down the right track. And one of the things that I found in talking to friends of mine who are in recovery is that it wasn't uncommon for them to say, I didn't drink when I was pregnant, or I cut way back, because it was so real and so right with me all the time, that this reason that I had and the love that I felt for my children was so important. I didn't want to poison them, but then it's hard to stick with it. And one of the things that Alcoholics Anonymous, or Alcoholics Anonymous is not the only program for alcoholics.
Recovery. Yeah.
For recovery. There are others, but it's the one that most people know and it's what I'm familiar with. It's a way to say how are you worth your own recovery? Because all these things come and go, and you're the only one who's with you all the time. And so some of what recovery is about, it was very interesting for me to learn, especially through my dad's experience. It's not just about not drinking. It's also about personal growth. And it's about being honest with yourself and honest with other people. It's about redemption. It's about self-love and self-forgiveness. And if you can forgive yourself, you can be worth your own sobriety, So it really is beautiful stuff.
So how are you worth it? Yeah. Which kind of leads me into this quote that you shared for the book clubs. It's fear and shame, an alcoholic's constant companions. So did it surprise you to learn about that? And did you learn about some coping mechanisms for dealing with that fear and shame?
Sure. And one of the things that was so illuminating to me as the more I asked questions, the more memoirs I read, the more AA meetings I went to. These are not. It's a very specific disease that obviously only certain people have, but these are problems we all have. We all feel ashamed of things sometimes. We all feel anxious and afraid. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that really is, may not solve the problem, but always makes it better is human connection. And I think that, that's what Alcoholics Anonymous offers to people who are struggling with that disease, is somebody else to talk to, somebody else to feel like I'm not in this alone.
Right. I'm not the only one.
I'm not the only one. And, for my dad, a lot of what his alcoholism was based on was an anxiety disorder that he was, medicating with alcohol. There's a lot of, and also being an alcoholic can make you anxious, and create shame and fear. It can be a really rough, cycle. But human connection is really what we all need,
Yeah. It is. It's a tough disease. We also have some of that in our family, and
most people do.
Yeah, most people do, right? And that's what's so interesting, because it's almost like, well, I don't want to talk about it because fear and shame, right? Yeah. But it's so common, and our society is set up to, hey, let's meet for a drink, everything Absolutely. Is around a drink.
Yeah, it's so true. It's really a hard thing, and it is a disease that doesn't really have a cure other than, sort of keeping it at bay with, trying to make good decisions, like having your community and choosing other things to do other than indulging in alcohol, which can be really hard.
Yeah. So when you developed these characters, did you have a favorite?
Oh, you know what? It's really interesting. I love all my characters. I love even the bad guys.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, and it's funny, I've heard other authors say this, like when I said this, and I've heard other authors say, hey, yeah, me too. It's a little bit when you're writing, for me, it's kind of like method acting. Like I am each character. I have to be in their head. I have to be thinking about why are they doing these things? Why, what's my motivation here? As like, the typical actor says. Why are they doing what they're doing? If you can understand your characters, you can write them so much better.
Mm-hmm.
So I really try to sort of be with them. So I can't say I have favorites. I have characters. I mean, I love the two main characters. I love them all, really. I can't say I have a favorite. It would feel like having a favorite kid,
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. But what about the dialogue? Did you go to, after you started writing, did you go to some writing workshops to get an idea of how to put it all together, to create dialogue's hard?
It's funny. I think everybody's got their strong suit, things that feel easier to them. Dialogue is something that's always been sort of come pretty natural to me. It's also my sixth book, so it's not my first rodeo, so I kind of know what I'm doing. That being said, I do have a writing group for other authors, and the five of us, whenever anybody's got a first draft of something, we throw it out to each other, and I get a lot of great feedback from them about, like, here's where I got bored, or this isn't making sense, or you need to either commit or pull this thread, or, that kind of thing. They're very kind. In fact, this book, Catch Us When We Fall, is dedicated to them because they're kind but honest. And we've all become great friends, which is really nice. But once again, having a community to go to and say, what do you think? Is this working? Is this, is really so important.
Yeah, having a community. And that was hard during the pandemic. We all
It was tricky.
Lost so much community.
Yeah.
How did you guys deal with that?
We Zoomed like everybody else,
Zoomed.
Which wasn't really, it's just not as fun. But
not as I know.
No hugs. That was brutal for me. But but we could still talk, and we could still review each other's work and catch up on all the things. And thank God we had the technology we did.
Can you imagine?
No,
that would have really been hard.
Yeah.
Heidi says, I love what you're saying, Juliette. You really understand the disease. Thanks for sharing. Martha says, do you like to read? Who are some of your favorite authors?
So this is a question that authors get asked all the time. And I'm always like nervous about, like, first of all, like whatever book I'm in the middle of, usually the book that I'm the most excited about. Right now, I'm a big audiobook listener. And right now I'm listening to The Vanishing Half. And I have to admit, I don't usually read or listen to books that are like the big books, because I figure, well, they're getting a lot of support. I'm going to read something that's a little more, sort of not so well known. But The Vanishing Half, grabbed me for some reason. And the audiobook is amazing.
Really?
It's so good. Yeah, I've actually, my last four audiobooks have been, and they're not always good. Sometimes the book is good and the narrator's not great. And then it's like, I feel like this is a good book. I just can't stand this person's voice, or, that kind of thing. So,
And do you just read nonfiction?
Fiction. I mostly read fiction.
I'm sorry, fiction. Yeah.
That's okay. I mostly read fiction. I love make-believe. But occasionally, I read all the Malcolm Gladwell books, and occasionally there's nonfiction that I'm particularly interested in, but I trend towards fiction. Yeah.
But when you're doing your research, is that more like in person, or are you reading and researching online?
It's everything, anything to get my hands on. It's books, it's interviewing people, it's watching videos, it's anything. It's amazing right now. I think it's kind of funny. So two of my books are historical fiction, and the research for that is like crazy. It's like 10 times what it takes for contemporary fiction, for my experience. And I find that I'm amazed at how much is available. it's like an embarrassment of riches. Like you get all this great information and it's like, I can't stuff all this into the story, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the internet really does have lots of wonderful, you know, things for us.
When we first met, you told me you're already working on another book that
Yes.
was more geared towards, or the characters were more the baby boomer characters. Are
Yeah.
you at liberty to tell us anything about that?
I'm at liberty because I'm in charge of me. So I get to say whatever I feel like saying. Yeah, so this latest book, the main character is 58 years old, which I happen to be 58 years old. And thank you. I'm very proud of that, to be honest.
Right.
Made it this far.
Yay!
So and one of the things that really fascinated me about the times we've been living in was reading articles and hearing people say how they took this sort of pause, this inability to like go out and see other people and travel and, you know, do all that cool stuff, to sort of look inward. And to review their lives in some ways. And you heard about people making big changes, like, I don't want to work in this industry anymore. I don't really want to be with this person anymore. I want to move to a different city, or I want to, you know, and maybe not something they could act on right in the middle of everything blowing up, but that sense of reviewing one's life really sort of grabbed me. And I thought, you know, I have to admit, I did a little review and I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty glad that I ended up where I ended up with the guy I ended up with and the job I have and, you know, where I live. But what if I didn't? And so I came up with this character, Helen Spencer, and Helen is reviewing her life and does not like what she sees. Mm-hmm. And she really sees how things little decisions she made along the way sort of made her life go sideways. And when she traces back all these little, you know, one and then the other, and then she traces it back, she could trace it to a night she spent in high school, her senior year of high school. She spent a night in the woods with a boy she loved, who loved her. And the next day, everything blew up. And so because of that, she made this decision. Because of that, she made this decision. And, you know, as she's thinking about this, she's taking a walk in the woods with her little granddaughter on her back. And she sees a little boy alone, like 3 years old, running through the woods. And he trips and falls, and she goes to help him, and she says, "Where's your grown-up?" And suddenly she hears a man's voice calling out for him, panicked, and he shows up to grab his grandson, and it's the boy from high school, who she hasn't seen in 40 years. And she doesn't want to deal with it. She does not want to process this.
Really?
She does not, but he does, and he pursues her to say, we need to talk about this. So the story goes back and forth between 40 years ago when they were in high school together and how their relationship progressed to that moment. And then now, how they're going to sort out what happened and hopefully find some forgiveness for each other. So that's the story.
Sounds like a good one. Yeah. When is that one supposed to come out?
I don't have a pub date yet, but it should be probably a little bit more than a year, probably early 2023. That's what I'm hearing.
Oh, 2023. Wow. Okay. Well, you'll have
so far away, but it's like a year.
I know. Well, you'll have to keep us posted so that I can share that.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, let people know where they can find you. And I also want to say, so on her website, she has a book club section for each book with questions that you can ask in your book club. But Juliette, and I don't want to speak for you, but I know that you told me this, Juliette will also sit in through Zoom or whatever on your book club and meet with your folks. So if you choose to engage with her, go to JulietteFay.com and pick out one of the books. Either this one, Catch Us When We Fall. She's got 5 others there that you can choose from. So hope that you will do that.
You can just email me. People can just, if your book club chooses it, and email me. And if I am available to, whenever you're getting together, if I'm available, I'll be happy to join the conversation. It's really a lot of fun for me to be able to talk about the ending and everything else.
Yeah. And you have some great questions there too. She also has a Facebook page, Juliette.Fay.author. So you can join her there and follow her journeys and see what other people are saying and make your own comments on some of the books that she has written. So awesome. So glad that, did I tell everybody what a warm, engaging person you are? You're awesome. Thank you.
That's very nice. Thank you.
So glad to have
Appreciate
you on the show. This was really fun.
Well, I really appreciate your questions, Wendy. Your questions were really interesting, really different. So, you're a wonderful interviewer. So I appreciate
thank
that.
you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think you're going to get a call from Martha. She says she's in 5 book clubs.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Email me, Martha. We can talk.
How do you have time to read that much? Oh my gosh. Okay, so my guest for next week, it's 2 people. They're a couple, Ron Demonay and Nancy Neal, and they have just started a place called the Dawn Retreat Center, which is in upstate South Carolina. And it's a place for people looking to unwind, learn more about themselves, find inner harmony and harmony with nature. Now, they opened right before the pandemic. So you can imagine that was a big letdown for them initially, but they were able to do some outdoor activities during this time. And now they are ready to really kind of ramp up the program, particularly starting in the spring. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Nancy has a private practice that's focused on mind, body, and spirit counseling. She's also a meditation and yoga teacher. And Ron is a retired business executive. He is a former president of Rotary, as I was. That's how I met him. And so he is all about service above self. So this is going to be a show with a time for us to breathe and get centered right before the Thanksgiving holidays. So hopefully you
Sounds wonderful.
I know, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
So thank you all for tuning in today. I know everybody has busy lives, and I so appreciate having you as part of the Hey Boomer community. And please help me grow this audience. Share this. Remember that note you took in the beginning. Share the website with your friends and family and have them subscribe. And remember, you are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green with Juliette Fay, and this has been Hey Boomer.